In 1975, in a beige Kodak lab tucked behind corporate walls, a 24-year-old engineer aimed a clunky, toaster-sized prototype at a checkerboard. A grainy digital photo appeared, black, white, and full of danger. Because inside that moment hid a future Kodak desperately didn't want. Film was their empire. Digital was the spark that could burn it to the ground. So instead of celebrating the breakthrough, executives ordered silence. "Don't tell anyone," they whispered. That single decision set off the slowest corporate suicide in history. In this video, we're breaking down how Kodak's greed destroyed its own invention. Before digital threatened them, Kodak wasn't just a company, it was the memory monopoly. 90% of all films sold in the US carried the Kodak name. Every birthday, graduation, and family vacation passed through their chemistry labs. Their cameras were cheap, almost disposable, because the real money came later. Kodak didn't sell photographs, Kodak sold addiction. Every shot was another hit, another sheet of film to develop, another print to buy. It was the perfect business model, low entry, high dependency. But success has a way of rotting from the inside. Kodak executives became guardians of the past, not architects of the future. They believed film wasn't just profitable, it was untouchable. They believed consumers would always prefer prints. They believed no one wanted photos trapped inside machines. This mentality hardened into doctrine. Any idea that threatened their film margins was dismissed before it ever reached daylight. The tragedy wasn't that Kodak lacked innovation. It was that innovation terrified them. They had built an empire so profitable, so predictable, that they refused to imagine a world where their golden calf could die. And that refusal would become the root of every fatal decision that followed. In 1975, engineer Steve Sasson walked into a conference room holding a 3.6-kilogram box of wires, circuits, and hope. The prototype digital camera was slow, 23 seconds to process a single image, but it worked. It was the world's first step into a future without film. Sasson expected questions, debate, maybe excitement. Instead, silence. Executives huddled, brows lowered, calculations firing behind their eyes. They weren't evaluating innovation, they were measuring risk. This device didn't just improve photography. It eliminated the very revenue stream Kodak depended on. No film. No development. No prints. No recurring profits. It was a direct assault on their financial heart. After a long pause, one executive delivered the verdict that would echo across decades. "That's cute, but don't tell anyone about it." In that moment, Kodak committed its first irreversible sin, prioritizing today's cash over tomorrow's survival. Digital wasn't dismissed because it was weak. It was dismissed because it was too strong. The camera was shelved. The idea was smothered. And a company capable of leading a new world chose instead to bury its own future in the dark. Kodak's internal logic hardened into a deadly loop, one that executives repeated like a mantra. Film equals recurring revenue. Digital equals a one-time sale. And in a boardroom obsessed with quarterly performance, that equation was enough to handcuff the future. Every digital proposal faced the same corporate interrogation. Will it protect film? Will it drive prints? Will it keep customers dependent? If the answer was anything but yes, the project died. The result? Kodak engineers spent the next decade trying to innovate inside a cage. Concepts were twisted, suffocated, or forced to serve film, even when it made no sense. Digital teams were told to slow down, to avoid cannibalizing existing revenue. Meanwhile, competitors with nothing to protect were racing forward. This was Kodak's fatal greed loop. Fear of losing profit delay innovation. Competitors advance, fear increases, more delay. It was the same psychology that crippled the music industry before streaming, and the same pattern destroying giants today. Kodak wasn't fighting the future. They were fighting themselves. By the early 1990s, the air was changing. Sony released digital consumer cameras. Canon and Nikon began integrating sensors into their professional lines. Home computers were becoming common. The internet was emerging. Every external signal screamed the same warning: digital is coming. Kodak saw it. Their analysts predicted digital dominance. Their patents piled up. Their engineers begged for resources. But the executives couldn't let go of film. Not yet. Not while it still printed money. So Kodak took the path of compromise, the most dangerous path of all. They built digital cameras that secretly funneled users back into film-based processes. They developed photo CDs that required specialized machines. They built kiosks designed to convert digital photos into prints. Every innovation was contaminated by the same internal mandate. Digital must serve film, not replace it. This approach wasn't strategy, it was denial wrapped in technology. A Frankenstein business model, half digital body, half film heart, fully doomed. And while Kodak wrestled with its identity crisis, the world accelerated. Consumers wanted convenience, not chemistry. Faster memories, not physical ones. Kodak had the tech advantage, but lacked the courage to use it. They didn't fall behind because they were slow. They fell behind because they were scared. Kodak's leadership made one catastrophic, irreversible decision. They tried to force digital photography into the economics of film. Instead of embracing an ecosystem built on sharing, storing, or online platforms, they clung to the past. Their digital roadmap became a maze of detours. Photo CDs that required expensive home players. Kiosks that still relied on chemical development. Digital cameras that integrated features designed to push users back into printing services. Kodak didn't ask, how will digital change the world? They asked, how do we make digital behave like film? This single question killed Kodak's innovation pipeline. Engineers complained their products were being intentionally crippled. Executives insisted consumers would always want physical prints. But data said otherwise, digital photos were doubling year over year. Still, Kodak refused to cannibalize its cash cow. They believed they could outrun disruption while keeping their margins intact. They believed print revenue would remain the center of photography. They believed consumers wouldn't betray a century of habit. But markets don't respect nostalgia. Kodak wasn't preparing for disruption, they were negotiating with it. And the future doesn't negotiate. The real collapse didn't begin with cameras, it began with phones. From 2007 onward, the smartphone detonated every assumption Kodak held sacred. Suddenly, photography wasn't a product. It wasn't a ritual. It wasn't a weekend errand or a glossy print. It became instant, free, and infinite. A billion pockets became a billion cameras. And Kodak watched in horror as the world abandoned the very behavior their entire business depended on, printing. The digital tsunami hit in 3 violent waves. Wave 1, convenience becomes king. People stopped developing film. They stopped saving negatives. They stopped caring about physical albums. The idea of waiting, even 1 hour, to see a photo became absurd. Kodak's entire logistics empire collapsed almost overnight. Wave 2, sharing replaces printing. Photos moved to Facebook, MySpace, Flickr, smartphones, then Instagram. Suddenly the value wasn't in owning a print, it was in broadcasting a moment. Kodak had no social platform. No cloud storage strategy. No app ecosystem. After inventing digital, they became outsiders in the digital world. Wave 3, smartphones crush camera sales. Compact cameras, a category Kodak once dominated, died almost instantly. Consumers no longer needed a separate device. Kodak's hardware division hemorrhaged cash. Their printing-based model had no place in a world where photos lived on screens, not paper. The cruel irony? Kodak held thousands of digital photography patents, many worth billions. But patents can't save you if you misunderstand the market. They monetized bits and pieces, never the ecosystem. They licensed technology, but never built the platform. They had innovation, but not imagination. Competitors didn't beat Kodak because they were smarter. They beat Kodak because they weren't chained to the past. Kodak wasn't killed by disruption alone. They were killed by the speed of a world they refused to believe in. By the time Kodak finally accepted non-print revenue, smartphones had already rewritten the rules. The empire wasn't dying, it was already gone. By 2010, Kodak's financials were in freefall. Film sales were a skeleton of their former glory. Digital camera sales collapsed behind smartphones. Their print-based business model had become a relic. The company desperately sold patents, closed facilities, and slashed jobs. But these were symptoms, not cures. In 2012, Kodak filed for bankruptcy. A company that once sat atop a global monopoly had bled out from self-inflicted wounds. Investors were stunned. Analysts sifted through ruins. How could the creator of digital photography die because of it? The answer wasn't technological failure. It wasn't timing. It wasn't competition. It was psychology. Kodak had trapped itself in the golden cage of its own success. The more money film made, the harder it became to imagine a world without it. Executives weren't protecting the business, they were protecting the past. And when disruption finally struck, Kodak didn't face a competitor. They faced the consequences of decades of denial. When you peel back the final layer of Kodak's story, you don't find a technology failure or a timing issue waiting underneath, you find something far more human. Kodak died because it loved its past more than its future. The company worshipped its film margins, clung to them, defended them, and shaped every decision around protecting that one golden vein of profit. And in doing so, they treated digital not as a revolution they could lead, but as a threat they needed to restrain. Inside the boardrooms, fear became strategy. Executives hesitated to move forward because moving forward meant cannibalizing the empire they had built. They convinced themselves consumers would keep printing forever, even as millions began sharing images online. They believed they could bend digital into behaving like film, unaware that the ground beneath photography had already shifted. Innovation didn't fail at Kodak, it suffocated under the weight of nostalgia. A company that once defined how the world captured memories could not imagine a world that no longer needed its chemicals and paper. By the time Kodak finally acknowledged this new reality, the future had already chosen its champions. Kodak didn't lose the digital age. They refused to enter it. If this breakdown opened your eyes to how fast giants can fall, then don't just click away, stay ahead of the next one. Because the warning signs we uncovered in Kodak are already showing up in today's biggest companies, and most people won't see the cracks until it's too late. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next autopsy. Hit like if you want more deep dives into the corporate mistakes hiding in plain sight. And drop a comment telling me which company you want on the table next. The business world doesn't reward the biggest player. It rewards the one who sees the danger first. Stay sharp. The next collapse is already in motion.